The hearing room was supposed to be routine. Another day, another testimony, another set of talking points from a man in a suit who had rehearsed every line. But the silence, that strange silence before the confrontation began, felt like the split second before a storm. And when it came, when Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia leaned into her microphone, voice steady but laced with a steel edge, the Treasury Secretary didn't stand a chance. "Mr. Secretary," she began, pausing just long enough to set every head turning, "do you know the poverty rate in this country?" It should have been simple. A softball. Basic. The kind of number that every serious economic leader has tattooed on the inside of their brain. But Scott Bessant stammered. He fumbled. His eyes darted down to papers that suddenly seemed useless. The cameras zoomed in on his nervous expression as he muttered, I believe it is in the teens." Gasps echoed. Committee members frowned. Garcia arched her brow as if the entire room had just witnessed something shameful. She fired back. "In the teens. Okay. Well, it's about a little over 11%. Her correction cut as sharply as a surgeon's blade, precise, undeniable, delivered without theatrics. And those words didn't just correct him, they exposed him. In that instant, millions online who would later see the clip understood the subtext. The top financial mind in the administration couldn't even name the most basic measure of American hardship. He could cite market indexes, investor confidence, and the trajectory of tax cuts. But hunger, poverty, the lived reality of 37 million Americans? He didn't have the number. People began whispering across the room. And beyond that quiet chamber in Washington, Twitter feeds erupted as if struck by lightning. Clips hit TikTok and Instagram with captions like, "If you don't know poverty, you don't know America." Garcia's poised delivery went viral before her 5 minutes were even over. But the real story wasn't just the fumble, it was what came next, how Garcia took one man's uncertainty and turned it into a mirror reflecting a brutal truth. Those who claim to govern the economy often know far more about protecting the wealthy than lifting the poor, and in doing so she cracked this hearing wide open. Before poverty even came up, Garcia had already begun cornering Bessent with precision. She asked about the small print at the top of his testimony. "Embargoed until delivery." It sounded procedural, bureaucratic, yet Garcia knew better. She explained to the stunned room what it meant. Committee members had received Bessent's prepared remarks at 10:01 a.m., 1 minute after the hearing convened. In other words, they had no time to study, analyze, or prepare questions. The very people meant to hold him accountable had been deliberately blindsided. "Why did you request that?" Garcia asked. Her tone was calm, but beneath it was a subtle accusation. "Did you muzzle oversight into silence?" Bessent squirmed. "My staff, comms team, legislative affairs. I've been told this is standard practice." "Standard for you," Garcia snapped back, "but not for this committee." Her words landed like a gavel. She wasn't just angry about paperwork, she was pointing out the deeper game: opacity. If oversight is robbed of preparation, hearings become little more than a stage for polished talking points. No real accountability, no teeth, just theater. But Garcia wasn't playing theater. She was exposing it. And you could see the air shift in the room as Democrats leaned in, as Bessent's posture stiffened, as the audience sensed this wasn't going to be another rubber stamp exchange. Then came the pivot. The question about poverty. It wasn't a tangent. It was the perfect escalation. If you embargo your testimony to dodge prepared oversight, what else are you dodging? How much do you really know about the people whose lives you're shaping? Garcia's strategy was masterful. Procedural. Trick, moral revelation. She turned an inside baseball gripe about late submissions into a high-stakes declaration about transparency and truth. The secretary tried to brush it off, but Garcia reminded him, "We're not the press. We're Congress. We have oversight. At that point, her questioning became more than words exchanged between two people. It became symbolism, a watchdog against the arrogance of power. And when she followed up, again pressing him with, "Do you know the poverty rate in this country?" The metaphor was complete. She had cut through the surface. And what came out was proof that the very architect of economic policy had no grasp of the suffering written in millions of American households. The conflict had ignited, and there was no turning back. The longer Garcia pressed, the more revealing the contrast became. She pointed out that Bessent's prepared testimony was obsessed with tax cuts, deregulation, boasting about markets, gleaming numbers disconnected from neighborhoods. Not one mention of poverty, not one acknowledgement that beneath the rosy gloss of Wall Street boom, families were struggling to pay rent, buy groceries, or afford safe child care. "You've not said one thing about what we're doing to help the poor," Garcia fired. "In fact, even when we were talking about car seats, you know who needs car seats more than anyone else? Poor families. They can't afford the price of new ones. They're forced to buy them at garage sales, hoping they're even safe. And now you want policies that'll make them even more expensive." Bessent tried to parry. He scrambled to recite, bullet points bloated with jargon, promising that no tax on tips or no tax on overtime were benefits for the poor. But Garcia refused to let the smokescreen linger. She pointed out none of that was in his testimony. None of it showed preparation or foresight. His document said one thing: cuts for the wealthy, bonuses for optics, and his defense now smelled improvised, last minute, hollow. The more he spoke, the clearer the gap became. Bessent talked about markets. Garcia spoke about people, and she didn't stop at numbers. She skewered the $5,000 baby bonus proposal, essentially a lump sum to encourage childbirth. Garcia tore it apart. What happens after the baby is born? After the cameras are gone? Parents still have to pay for food, clothes, health care, child care. That $5,000 vanishes, and families are left stranded. Her point was searing. Poverty isn't a headline you can pay off with a gimmick. It's a structure, a trap, a system that requires sustained policy to dismantle. At one point, Garcia invoked her hometown of Houston. She explained how tariffs and trade wars ripple through her district immediately. Ports slowing, petrochemical workers losing shifts, entire industries feeling tremors just weeks after policy shifts in Washington. For her, poverty wasn't abstract. It was her district, her neighbors, her city's lifeblood. By then, Bessent looked visibly rattled. His repeated claims of being told by staff sounded flimsy against Garcia's lived examples. She painted poverty in human colors. The father working 2 jobs but failing to make rent. The mother who had to choose between paying for medication or food. The escalation climaxed when Garcia cut through Bessent's defense of low unemployment. He boasted, "Unemployment remains low." Garcia snapped. That should read unemployment. Went up. People are employed, sure, but they're still poor. 2 jobs and they're still in poverty. Why? Because your policies serve the rich while leaving ordinary people invisible. The committee fell into a near hushed awe. Garcia had built her case like a litigator dismantling a witness. Start with paperwork, prove opacity, then pin them to the floor with moral failure. In broadcasts later replayed across CNN, MSNBC, and every viral social platform, Garcia's crescendo was cut into a single blunt soundbite. "You've not said one thing about the poor." It became a rallying cry. The escalation was complete. The Treasury Secretary, once the picture of confident authority, now looked like a man flailing before a calm, surgical interrogator. And America could feel it. The villain wasn't evil, but arrogant, detached, a man of numbers trying to spar with a woman of people. And arrogance against dignity always collapses eventually. When the dust of the clash settled, Sylvia Garcia's point was unmistakable. She reframed the entire debate not as a technical fight over inflation or trade, but as a moral reckoning. Because Bessent's hesitation on the poverty rate wasn't just a mistake, it was symbolic. It proved a broader truth. Too often, Washington's economic leaders cannot speak directly to the reality of poverty because it isn't even on their agenda. Garcia reminded the nation that 11% isn't just a feather-light statistic. It represents over 37 million Americans. Children walking to school hungry, parents skipping meals to make sure their kids can eat, elderly Americans splitting prescription pills to stretch medicine another month. The moral crescendo rose out of her testimony like a drumbeat. GDP does not feed people. Wall Street growth doesn't cover rent. Stock buybacks don't change the price of milk. If policymakers cannot understand poverty, they cannot solve it. And in that framing, Garcia gave viewers not just indignation, but inspiration. She turned her fight into a lesson for all of us. We've all been Bessent at times, she implied, focused on the metrics that look neat on paper while ignoring the deeper realities around us. But we can choose to be Garcia, the voice that steadies the storm, the questioner who refuses to let poverty slip off the page, the leader who says, dignity matters. Online, her words became scripture. Quote, posts everywhere repeated, if the Treasury Secretary doesn't know poverty, then who does he serve? Her defiance wasn't just a viral moment. It was a roadmap. The responsibility of leadership isn't to appease markets, it's to uplift people. And that's why this clash matters. Because when arrogance met authenticity, when carefully practiced detachment met lived truth, the lesson was clear. Truth, quiet, steady, unflinching, will always outlast noise. Rachel Maddow once screamed on live television and left a viral clip. Bessent didn't scream. He stumbled. His downfall wasn't loud. It was quiet, hesitant, evasive. But Garcia's voice, steel-lined and patient, is what history will remember. And that is the takeaway. Fury fades, arrogance crumbles, truth and dignity endure.